Okay, we're going to be starting here in a couple of minutes. So just be patient. Hope everyone is doing well. It is kind of a weird situation, of course, but we do what we can, right? All right, who's all on here? Who do I have here so far? Whoop, hang on for a second here. I got to do something right here. There we go. Hopefully. Hey, Jesse, how are you doing? Nada. Mega, how you doing? Dallas, Cohen, Hope. Glad you guys are all on so far. Hope you're all doing well. You're social distancing, washing your hands, doing all that fun stuff. Hey guys, how you doing? Kathleen, Ureli, Jonathan, Amal, Tyler, Mina, Bishnu. I'm doing well, thank you. Been doing a lot of work over the weekend to get this thing rolling here. All right, hey, again, how are you doing? Mina, you're awake. Well, I'm glad that you are. It's you know what is this, week number 2 in lockdown? Third week off so far. Hard to believe that we haven't seen each other for quite some time. So, all right. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. How this is going to work. First of all, I am using, the textbook that we were going to use for the review period. So it doesn't quite match your textbook, so don't worry about that too much. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going through every chapter in this book over the course of the next few weeks. And depending on if we are going to get back together, I don't know. But this is how this is going to run. And I'm typically going to do these types of lectures on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at about the same time. So please just keep that in mind. I'm going to cover 3 topics today. So make sure that you are aware of that. Hopefully it won't take much more than 45 minutes to an hour, because after that, again, I get a little bored as well. All right. Okay. So we're going to take a look at, we're just starting right back to the beginning of where, College Board is going to start possibly testing us from. We know that College Board is not going to test us over the 20th century. So those last few chapters in your book, from I believe it was chapter 25, maybe 26. I'm not real sure where Unit 6 started in your book, but they are not going to be testing over that. So my personal opinion is I am not going to go over that. Now, if you guys want to read up on it, take notes on it, by all means, go ahead. I am not going to be looking for it. Some other teachers call me crazy for not finishing it, but you know what? We're kind of in a weird situation. And I just want to make sure that you have all of the information available for, this test, however this test is going to look. I did find out that there is going to be no multiple choice on the test. So if your strong suit was multiple choice, it's not going to be there for you. So make sure, you are aware of that, and don't be spending too much time with multiple choice and trying to figure that out. But it is a good practice to answer some of those questions and just test yourself over them, because it'll help you with the writing portion as well. What is the writing portion going to look like on the exam? I don't know. My gut is telling me short answer questions, like 2 or 3. But after that, I really don't know. We won't know that for another couple of weeks. All right, so today we're going to talk about developments in East Asia right off. Our essential question is, I know you can't read the far right-hand side of it as you look at your screen because of where my beautiful face is located there. The essential question we're going to ask today is, how did developments in China and the rest of East Asia between 1200 and 1450 reflect continuity? Why did things remain the same from earlier time periods? What types of innovation did they have? And, we're going to take a look at their diversity. So during this time period in Asia, China is dominated by Mongol invasions and other invasions of nomadic groups. And this is a story of how China and how much influence they exert in this region. And we're also going to take a look at Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, and how they handled these invasions as well. So first of all, we're going to take a look at government developments in the Song Dynasty. Now, if you remember, the Song Dynasty replaces the Tang Dynasty. Their reign was what we call the golden era of Chinese history. Now, one of the strengths that China had at this time was their imperial bureaucracy. Remember, they are an empire, and their bureaucracy, the word bureaucracy just means governmental systems. And this represents a continuity across Chinese history, because if you remember, the Han Dynasty, the Sui Dynasty, they all had imperial bureaucracies. Remember, the civil service examination is very, very important. You've got a position, young men got a position in the government based on how well you did on this test. It was called a meritocracy. Now, remember, this was mostly for high-class young men. Now, if you could afford it, lower-class young men could take this test as well. It was sort of some upward mobility could be seen in this system of the civil service examination and the meritocracy. But the problem here is that this bureaucracy grew so big and so large, it got so heavy with this new group of people called the scholar gentry, that it did begin to weaken the country. Because one of the things it did is that it did increase the costs. All right, so going on to economic developments in China. Again, guys, sorry. Let's not focus on the audio of this broadcast. I can't help that much. It's all based on the web that I am currently under. So don't send me text messages in the middle of my lecture or anything like that. I do realize it. Let's not be focusing on that. All right. One of the things about the economic development in China at this time, of course, is the Grand Canal. And if you take a look at that picture there to the upper left-hand side of the screen, that is how far the Grand Canal went. It was 30,000 miles of waterways. All right. Gunpowder begins to spread across China to the west. Agricultural productivity increases. Champa rice from Vietnam expands agriculture production in China. It allows rice to be grown in places where it had never grown before. China is coming up with new elaborate irrigation techniques, water wheels, ditches, plows, things of that nature. You see this increased abundance of food, and then under the Song Dynasty, you see the population, the population of China grows from about 25% of the world's population to 40% of the world's population. Other economic developments in China at this time, you have manufacturing and trade going on. Coal was the first used to help manufacture iron goods, and then eventually early steel production. And again, it was much earlier than the Europeans. Okay, we call this proto-industrialization, relied on home-based manufacturing. All right, artisans manufacture porcelain and silk, which spread across the area due to increasing trade networks of the time. The compass is being used on ships to help navigate through this as well. So economics are starting to grow and prosper during this time. Maritime trade with the use of the compass, which you saw on the last slide. Larger cargo ships, printing of paper for maps. We see that for the first time in China. It changes, China's economy changes here, because it was a local economy. But with this new innovation and things of that nature, it becomes more regional. It goes from local to regional, and then eventually it's going to go across Eurasia here. Other things that are produced are porcelains, textiles, and teas. This Grand Canal leads to increased internal trade, and then, of course, the navigational technology leads to more trade in the South China Sea. So as we see here, economic developments in China tend to begin to grow. Other innovations in economic developments, taxes are starting to be used in China at this time. It is helping promote the building of the infrastructure, streets and roads and things of that nature. Instead of requiring people to build this, the government is actually paying people now. That is what the taxes are for. It increases the amount of money in circulation. China gains tributary states, places like Japan and Korea. Countries have to pay money to them to provide goods to honor the Chinese emperor. The emperor has expected representatives to show their respect to him by kowtowing, this very big bow to show their reverence, their deference to him. And it also just gives up this idea that he is a very, very powerful person. And eventually, late in this time period, the emperor would send out these huge treasure fleets. Zheng He, we talked about Zheng He in class, and, about what he did. And we'll get into him much later in another unit here coming up. All right, let's take a look at the social structures in China. China was the most urbanized country in the world. All right. Class structure, scholar gentry is what I talked about before, were educated in Confucian texts. They would become one of the most influential class in China at this time. Other classes included farmers, artisans, and merchants. Merchants had a low status in China due to their they didn't work very hard. And under Confucian values, Chinese, they valued hard work, and they didn't consider merchants as hardworking at all. Lower rungs of society included peasants. All right, they were working for wealthy landowners. They're looking to pay off debts. And also, one of the things that the Song Dynasty did that other empires didn't do at this time is they created public hospitals. And these public hospitals provided health care for those who could not afford it. All right. Also, to go with the role of structures in China are the role of women. We always have to think about women during this time period. Again, due to Confucian society, they did have some rights, not a whole lot. They always had to defer to the men, of course. Very patriarchal society. And then, of course, as we all know, they had foot binding. And this is upper class women only. Not all women in China had their foot bound. This is to show they are in deference to men at this time. And this was practiced until it was finally banned in about 1912. So, it was less than or just over 100 years ago that foot binding was banned in China. That, seems hard to believe. Another thing that goes along with cultural developments and intellectual developments in China during this time, paper and printing, of course. The Chinese were the first to use a wood block, and a Buddhist scripture is said to be the first printed text, and that was printed back in the 7th century. Printed booklets were used on how to farm efficiently. Reading and poetry became widespread to Chinese privileged class at this time. We have a lot of religious diversity in China. Of course, China is mostly Confucianist, but we do know that Buddhism spreads into China during this time. A little bit earlier than this, of course, that Buddhism spreads out of India. And it spreads because of the Silk Road. Taoism, Theravada Buddhism, Mayan Buddhism, and Tibetan Buddhism were all this large, diverse class of religions in China at the time. The Song Dynasty, a little bit more friendly to Buddhism than previous dynasties, but they do not promote it as much. Okay, they still prefer the native tradition of Confucianism. That's native to China. Filial piety is emphasized to maintain order during the Song Dynasty. Neo-Confucianism becomes popular in Japan, Korea, and Vietnam, which is a blend of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. All right. So let's take a look at Japan here real quickly during this time period. Religiously, they promote Buddhism. During the high-end period, they emulate Chinese traditions in politics, arts, and literature. They did move in new directions of literature with the Tales of Genji, which was a very popular book that talked about the high court system of Japan at the time. Also, feudalism is the main player in politics in China or in Japan at this time. They have no centralized government. Power is spread out amongst the country here, which is very unlike the Chinese. The Chinese had a very centralized government. All the power rested with the emperor. Remember, in Japan at this time, as it says there in the slide, the emperor is a figurehead and religious leader of Japan. They had the power to appoint the shogun, but they had no other political importance. Okay, the real power rested in the class of the daimyo. They're about third level down. They battled for control of the land. The majority of people in Japan worked as rice farmers. Feudalism is the idea of obligation to the class above you. Not a whole lot of upward mobility here. Again, daimyos had most power. They had more power than the aristocracy or or other people like them, which is very different from European feudalism. And once we get into Europe, we'll talk about it. This is all a part of, and also that kind of goes in context with all this, is the idea of the Bushido Code. The Japanese live in this idea of the Bushido Code, and the Bushido Code is hard work, loyalty, honor until death. Okay, so let's take a look at Korea real quick. Again, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam here that we're going to take a look at. Not a whole lot of information needed for this time period, but I just want to introduce you to it. All right. Now, Korea is a tributary state to China at this time. Centralized government, all the power rests with an emperor of some sort. Buddhist and Confucianist, so we see this cultural diffusion of religions coming from China into Korea. They adopted the Chinese writing system. The landed aristocracy are more powerful than what they were in China at the time. All right, and then our last one we're going to take a look at is we are going to take a look at Vietnam. They adapted the Chinese writing systems and architectural styles, of course. They had more of an adversarial relationship with China. They had a lot of violent rebellions against China at the time, and they were very successful, and they were eventually able to push Chinese influence out. Vietnamese women were more independent than Chinese women of the time. And again, a lot like Japan, a lot like Europe at this time, political centralization did not occur too much. It was very decentralized. All right. So that kind of rounds out of what we're going to talk about with East Asia. We are going going to move into the Middle East here in a couple of moments. So I'm going to give you a couple of moments to give yourself a little bit of a break. Give your hands a rest, and we will start up here in a couple of moments. And I will kind of go through what you guys have been talking about. If there's any legit questions there, I'll answer them. All right. Let me just pull up my slide for the Middle East here. Hey, Mia, I am posting these streams on my YouTube channel, so they're already there. All right. They're there. The one thing, FUBAR, I'm assuming that's Legion. The one thing about Vietnam that you want to keep in mind is that Vietnam was a little bit more rebellious to Chinese influence. There was a lot of rebellions. They fought against the Chinese influence, and they were very successful in eventually getting the Chinese out. Another thing about Vietnam here is that they copied architectural styles, a little bit of the language there. Also, women had a lot more independence, had a few more rights than what Chinese women did at the time. All right. But other than that, during this time period, not a lot of things about Vietnam here. Okay, I'm going to be starting here about developments in East Asia. I don't want that PowerPoint again. We've already done that one. My bad. I'm sorry. Here it is. Here's the one I want. And there we go. All right. Okay. Okay, let's get going here. I'm going to deal with developments in what we call Dar-al-Islam. Basically, we're going to be talking about the Middle East here in this time period. And our essential question here, of course, is that in the period of 1200 to 1450, it should say, how did Islamic states arise, and how did major religious systems shape society? One thing you have to remember here, Islam has not been around all that long. They are considered, basically the new kids on the block here. And they're dealing with a lot of different of ethnic groups and tribal groups in their area. Remember, Muhammad was a trader as well. Comes from a Bedouin clan, which was a very animistic and a polytheistic religion. And then, he gets the revelation, and eventually he creates what we now know as Islam, which is a very monotheistic religion. And again, one thing you have to keep in mind when we talk about religion, Islam, it is very, very similar to Christianity, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism, because remember, all four of these major world religions all come from the same parts of the world. So of course they have the basic same cultures, they have the same lifestyles. So it makes it very logical that these religions will be very, very similar. All right, so let's take a look at this. All right, so we're going to be dealing with invasions and shifts in trade routes during this time period. After the death of Muhammad in 632, Islam spreads very, very fast across North Africa, the Middle East, a little bit into Western Europe there. Sorry about that. Into Spain and into, West Asia there, real close to India. And eventually it will spread into the Indian subcontinent as well. Many Islam leaders showed tolerance to Christians and Jews, and another group that we don't talk too much about, but they were there, Zoroastrianism. Zoroasters, because they are what we call people of the book, the Bible, the Old Testament. When that's what we're talking about here, we're talking about the Old Testament. And cities that grow during this time, it's right here. Baghdad is a very, very important trading city. It becomes part of what is a very culturally relevant city. It has this place called the House of Wisdom. It's this renowned center of learning in Baghdad. All right, so going on here. Whoops, I got a little bit ahead of myself. There we go. All right, so the Islamic empires faced constant threats from invaders, just like all empires do. We saw it with the Romans, we saw it with the Han Chinese. We see this constant push on the borders of the Islamic empires. Invaders such as the Egyptian Mamluks, the Seljuk Turks, Crusaders, and we're going to be talking about the Crusades at a later date, and then of course the Mongols there to the east. Economically, the Abbasids were an important trade link connecting Asia, Europe, and North Africa here. But as trade will eventually begin to shift north here, it'll start to shift up into Europe and into Asia. We're going to see cities like Baghdad begin to fall in disrepair because more people are shifting to other cities like Samarkand here. Eventually will become a very important trade city along the Silk Road. All right. Cultural and social life here. Great universities are created in Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo. Cordoba, Spain, of course, and Cairo, Egypt. All right. Continuities such as education remain. Remember, the Muslims were very, very important in archiving and putting things into libraries of the great philosophers of Greek and Rome, the Roman era, Socrates and Aristotle and all that learning that was going on there that Europe loses a hold of during the Dark Ages. The Muslims are able to archive it, and they do it in these grand cities, in Cordoba, in Cairo, in Baghdad, in cities like that. And they study the Greek classics. They study math from India, paper making from China, and they all take that, and they archive it. They put it together, and then eventually, when the Crusades come down into the Middle East, the Europeans are going, "Oh my God, what is this stuff?" And eventually it's going to create this renaissance in Europe. And again, this is something that we will talk about, in another lecture here. Also a part of cultural and social life here. This is considered the golden age of Islam. Astronomy, math, ethics, philosophy, medicine, all advanced. Guys, they were doing cataract surgery, in the eye. They were pulling out cataracts out of eyes at this time, way before the Europeans were doing it. So they were very, very medically advanced here. Women wrote poetry here, as you see there to the left. She is a Sufi poet. Sufism grows during this time, and it helps the spread of Islam. All right. They adapt to local cultures, or Islam adapts to local cultures and interweaves traditions from Islam with local customs and beliefs. That is how Sufism is created, and many people will eventually flock to it. All right, and again, it does help Islam spread throughout, Asia, Africa, and into southern Spain there. And Also, as part of social life here, merchants are seen as a very, very important class here. Remember, Muhammad loved trading. He was a trader. He was a Bedouin trader. Um, as long as trade is fair and equal, trade is going to flourish. And as you can see, the trade routes here, they go through the Trans-Saharan Trade Network. They go into the Indian Ocean Trade Network here. The African Swahili coast, the East African Swahili coast. This is called the Gold Coast. Lots of trade spreads. As trade spreads, so does Islam. Remember, Islam merchants take it with them and they take it to other parts of the world. Eventually, this area of the world down here in Southeast Asia, outside of the Middle East, Southeast Asia will have the largest Muslim population in the world. They still do to this day because of these early traders in the Indian Ocean Trade Network. Okay? And slavery exists during this time period. The one thing about Muslims is they could not enslave fellow Muslims and peoples of the book. So Christians and Jews and Zoroasters could not be enslaved. It's very similar to when we get into slavery out of Africa to the Americas. Remember, the Europeans didn't allow Africans to convert to Christianity because Christianity bans the enslavement of other Christians. So that is a reason why Europeans don't allow, Africans to become Christians, during the African slave trade. Slaves at this time in Africa or in the Middle East, they're imported from Africa, Russia, and Central Asia. And again, it's because they owe debts. They are prisoners of war. They are criminals. It's typically not chattel slavery. Slavery is not a bought and sold thing at this time. Now, I'm not going to say it didn't exist, but that type, what we call chattel slavery, what we see in America, during the 15, 16, 1700s, that type of slavery is very, very little at this time for Arab nations or Arab empires. Now, women, can become slaves as well. They serve as concubines to men, and actually they have a little bit more freedom than free women. All right, then legal wives, because men would take on more than one wife here, or they would take on a concubine. It would not be the man's wife. It was just a side girl, as they say. All right, but they had more freedom. They could go to the market without a male relative. They could run errands, and they could potentially earn money to get themselves out of slavery. They could dance for men, and that could potentially earn them enough money to earn their freedom. So we do see a little, social movement in for women in Islam during this time. Now, Muslim women, they had higher status than Christian or Jewish women. They could inherit property. They could remarry if widowed, could receive a cash settlement if divorced. They could practice birth control. As you see, the Prophet Muhammad said, a good man treats a woman with honor. So, kind of keep that in mind and keep that stereotypical view that sometimes Western media and, Western literature gives us about Islamic women. They, the majority of them are not oppressed. They love their religion. They're not being forced into anything. Okay, keep that in mind. Let's take a look at Islamic rule in Spain at this time. All right. The Muslims are very successful when they invade the Iberian Peninsula. And when I call it the Iberian Peninsula, I basically mean it is southern Spain and Portugal in this area. Cordoba, Spain, that's what I'm showing you here on the screen, becomes a very important learning center and trade area. They are tolerant of many religions and belief systems here. Trade flourishes. Chinese goods begin to make their way into Europe because of the Indian Ocean Trade Network and them combining with the East Africans and then across the Trans-Saharan and then into Europe. And this paves the way for new learning, and it lays the groundwork for the European Renaissance here. And one of the important technological advances that the Muslims have is the Dhow ship, D-H-O-W, the Dhow ship. It is very fast, it's very maneuverable, and can carry, quite a bit of, cargo. So that ends, this section on Islam, developments in Dar-al-Islam at this point. I'm going to kind of give you a couple of moments here to grab something to drink again and kind of rest your hand, and we will go into our last topic today, which will be South Asia and Southeast Asia. All right, now I'll take a look, see if there's any questions I can answer as I get set up here again. Here we go. Okay, let me get my phone set back up here. It's amazing to do one of these live broadcasts type thing. You have to have like two different computers sitting up here in front of you. I have my phone that's giving me my notes. So I totally respect the guys that do this for a living. It's not an easy thing to do. And as you guys can tell too, the technology sometimes doesn't work like you would want it to, of course. And and maybe over the course of the next couple of weeks, that'll get better. I don't know. Would you guys be interested in doing a Zoom type of lecture where I can see your faces and you can see each other type of thing? I don't know. I can work on that to see if I can get that to work as well, but I haven't really messed with Zoom too much. That'd be fire. Nice, Michael. It was awkward, Monica. I can't about imagine how awkward it would be. But again, did you guys see? I don't know. It's somewhere out on. I think it's out on Facebook. It's out there. You can probably find it on various social media. But I saw it on Facebook where this company was having their some sort of conference, and you could see everybody on it, and then one person was watching it from the toilet. And it's being all recorded, watching her get up off the toilet, and everybody on the screen is kind of going, oh, yeah, what's going on? So I'm sure you can find it out there. My daughter sent that to me a couple of nights ago. So that is something I do not want to get into. So, okay, give a couple more moments, and then we're going to get started here. And then we will be done for today. And the next... thing. The next time we'll do this will be on Wednesday afternoon, and we'll finish up this what we call Unit 1. And again, I'm taking it out of this book here. This is not not the book that you guys have had to take notes. This was something we were going to hand out to you for the review process, but it is what it is. So, okay, let's get this done. You guys have got other things to do today. I sure hope other classes and other teachers are trying to help you out with this. I know it's kind of hard for them because a lot of your classes don't have that goal at the end of the year that we need to pass this test at the end of the year. So I'm kind of glad that I have that because it gets more buy-in into what I'm trying to do. But please, help out your other teachers. If they require you to do something, require you to be on something like this, please do it and respect it. And again, this isn't fun for any of us being stuck at home for the next few weeks because we can't get out and about and do our normal thing. And I really feel for seniors and any athletes, softball players, track, baseball, anything that's going on, this spring that you can't do anymore because of this. But here it is. And the real funny thing is that back in 1919 and 1920, as if you guys had done the Spanish influenza DBQ, you can see that it was happening 100 years ago as well. So it's kind of weird that we had this 100-year cycle with the pandemics. All right, so let's talk about South and Southeast Asia here. And our essential question here is, how did various beliefs and practices in South and Southeast Asia affect society and the development of states? Okay, it can be easy to overlook this area of the world at this time. There are crossroads of all the major interactions: Islam, Mongols, trade. They're heavily influenced by their neighbors: Islam to the west, China to the northeast. But the one thing is, you cannot skip this. It's full of all this history and this cultural diffusion and blending of ideas here. And it creates, some fascinating studies when we take a look at history. And we're going to dive into this. I mean, this is very surface level here in this unit, but we are going to really get into these areas, especially when we hit trade, Silk Road, the Mongols coming up in Unit 2 out of this book. And then, of course, we're going to see how much Europe influenced these areas of the world as well. So let's take a look at the political structures in South Asia. And when I say South Asia, I'm talking about India here. Guys, you have to make sure you understand those world regions, those AP world regions, where it's South Asia, East Asia, Central Asia, Western Europe, North America, Latin America, because that's how College Board is going to phrase those questions. Whatever our writing questions are going to look like here in a few weeks, it's not going to say India. It's not going to say China. It's going to say East Asia. It's going to say South Asia. So you have to make sure you reacquaint yourself with those world regions. All right. So Southern India here, as you can tell, it's kind of broke up into several parts. Southern India is more stable than Northern India here. The Chola dynasty there to the south rules for approximately 400 years, so they're able to keep control of that. Northern India experiences a great deal more upheaval. And during this time period, India as a country, India does not have a lot of unity. It's very fragmented at the time. One of the things that does bring unity or stability to northern India, of course, is Islam under the Delhi Sultanate. I'll talk a little bit more about the Delhi Sultanate coming up. But one thing you have to remember, that Hinduism has been established in this area of the world for centuries. So it is totally ingrained into their culture. Then here comes Islam, all right? This brand new monotheistic type of religion where only one God is worshipped, unlike the Hindu, where they worship, several variations of their one God, all right? So many Hindus resent Islam or the Muslims at this time, because when the Muslims take control, they establish what is called a jizya, which is a tax imposed on non-Muslims. Many Indians consider them as foreigners and outsiders, so they really don't trust the Muslims at the time. All right, like I said, a few moments ago, Hinduism has been a predominant religion in South Asia for centuries. Islam arrives in about the 7th century. And again, Muslims find it very hard to convert Islam or convert Indians to Islam early on. It just doesn't happen. But as trade begins to slowly expand, Muslim sailors begin to settle in Indian ports and they marry local women. Typically, the women would convert to Islam. All right? Islam attracts the lower castes of the Indian caste system, because remember, the untouchables, they don't see themselves as reaching, nirvana, getting all the way to reach enlightenment. There just are no ways for them to do that. So with Islam, which is a very equalizing, a universalizing religion, it gives them hope that, yeah, they too can reach that, really good afterlife. And they also look at it as maybe a possible way to improve their social status, because you don't want to be stuck on the bottom of this caste system here. But in the long run, it really doesn't improve their social status, because Hinduism is so ingrained into society that no one is willing to look past that. Early converts to Islam in India were Buddhists. Okay, at this time there was a lot of corruption going on in Buddhist monasteries. Raids on monasteries left Buddhism very unorganized. All right, so Buddhists converted to Islam, and this helps make Buddhism a very minority type of religion in India at this time. All right, Islam does little to alter the social structure of South Asia at this time. The caste system is a continuity. The caste system still exists to this day. Is it as strict as it was, back then? I don't know. I could tell you some stories of when I was in Nepal this summer that kind of surprised me, because I didn't think it was as strict. But I was talking to my guide in Nepal, and he was telling me he was part of the Brahmin caste, which is on the very top of the caste system right here. And he said, his daughter had a friend who was Kshatriya or Vaishya. I'm not sure of my pronunciations there. He said, yeah, they can be friends, but they are not allowed in my house. So that tells me that the caste system is still very strict. It is still very live, especially in those areas of Nepal that I was located in. The caste system leads to political stability here in a very highly decentralized area of the world, because you know your place in society. Okay, so if you know your place in society, you will tend to be a little bit more willing to follow laws or those that are above you in a very decentralized area of the world. And Islam really does not alter gender relations in India either. All right, let's take a look at some cultural interactions in South Asia during this time period. All right. Indian and Islam knowledge spread due to Muslim interaction, due to the Muslims in the Indian Ocean trade networks. We see Arabic numerals, math and astronomy begin to spread here. Architecture, this building I have here, this here is a Hindu temple. All right. When the Muslims arrived, they build this minaret, which is a Muslim spire where a imam or someone of that nature will get on the top of that spire and do the call to prayer. All right, so you see this spire being built on top of a Hindu temple here. Another thing, the Urdu language is developed at this time. It's a blend of Hindi, Arabic, and Farsi, which is Urdu is now the official language of Pakistan. So many of my Pakistani students come to Fossil Ridge speaking Urdu. And I don't know if they know that it's a blend, or if you know that it's a blend of Hindi, Arabic, and Farsi all put together. Farsi comes out of the Persian area, out of the Middle East. The Bhakti movement, Bhakti, develops in Hinduism. It does not discriminate against women. It's very similar to Sufism, Sufi Muslims, again, because it helps the spread, where Sufism helps the spread of Islam, Bhakti helps spread Hinduism in South Asia as well. All right, let's take a look at Southeast Asia. And guys, we are about to wrap this up here today. South Asia, India greatly influences Southeast Asia. Remember, Southeast Asia is the Philippines, Malaysia, in that area of the world. Hinduism and Buddhism spread along with Islam and Sufism. So if you go there, you'll see all these different cultures just kind of blending together. This is a very famous Muslim temple in Angkor Wat, and it uses the architectural styles of Southeast Asia. Sea-based and land-based empires are flourishing in South Asia at this time as well. So we're seeing a lot of cultural diffusion taking place. We're seeing a lot of trade happen in Asia, or in South Asia, Southeast Asia. We're seeing a lot of trade happening in the Middle East, and we're seeing a lot of trade happening in China. And this is going to bring us to our next unit. Okay, but before we get to the next unit on Wednesday, I'm going to be talking about Africa, the Americas, and Europe as well. So I'm going to be talking about those three topics in this same time period. Okay, because I need to give you context of where College Board is going to start potentially taking a look at test questions from. All right, guys, that's all I have today. All I will tell you here is, please, keep up to date. I'm not asking you to get into your books and read or anything like that any longer. But I've also uploaded, and I sent this stuff to Mr. Peterson as well. For those of you who are here from Mr. Peterson's class, I put into Canvas huge review packets. Okay, now basically what they do is they break down what I've talked about here, but on the last page of each of these packets are videos, video links that you can go to watch and learn more about these areas of the world. Guys, I can't do it all. All right, I can't give you everything that you could possibly need to know about this 45-minute test, which kind of blows me away. That's coming up here in May. You're going to have to do some of this on your own. And again, I'm thinking it's going to be short answer questions, and we'll go from there. I'm not going to promise you anything. I will not know what it looks like till April 3rd. So please take a look at those review packets. Maybe just go over the basic information what I've given you again, and then the last page is full of video links and people you need to know out of this area. All right, so hopefully everyone is doing well. You're staying safe, practicing social distancing, washing your hands, and getting a lot of sleep, because we need to stay well rested. And again, I hope to see you guys soon. I miss you. I miss the crazy interactions that we have in each and every class, and I wish we were in school together. But we will do what we need to do. All right. Peace out. Be good and be safe. Deuces.